Welcome to God and Creation. Today we have Ruth Bancewicz. Ruth, who are you affiliated with and what do you do?
So I work at the Faraday Institute for Science and Religion, and I'm their church engagement director.
Okay, so in that, what are you doing in your time? What's your work consist of?
Good question. Yes, so the Faraday Institute is an academic institute based in Cambridge. We're affiliated with Cambridge University through the Cambridge Theological Affiliation, and we do there's academic interdisciplinary research, and then there's also some of us are involved in communication to the general public. So my job is to work with the church in the UK and help church leaders and their congregations to engage with science in what we believe is a helpful way. So that will look like recommending speakers, going and giving talks myself on how science and Christianity can work together, producing resources, recommending resources. We've got a new website coming in a week or two where you can find all those. Yeah, so I've been working at the Faraday Institute for nearly 15 years now, but this role is just new the last couple of years. I've been producing resources for churches until then, but now we sort of bring it together in a long-term ministry. And most of what we do is encouraging people, helping them to understand areas they want to work on, and just getting involved in debates and discussions.
Beautiful. So you're actually a scientist. So could you
Yeah.
go into your background as a scientist and what you did?
Yeah, so I trained in genetics a long time ago. I left the lab in 2006, but until then I was working in genetics, developmental cell biology. Really, just my PhD was in understanding how the environment can interact with genes during development, embryonic development. And then I went on to work in a cell biology lab. I was going to work on Parkinson's disease, but then I realized I wasn't quite patient enough and I wanted to get into science communication.
Beautiful. Could you go into your background as far back as a child, even if you'd like? What got you into the sciences, and what are your biggest interests?
Well, I think I was just always encouraged to follow what I was interested in, what I was good at, and I think I enjoyed especially biology. I like exploring the living world. We spent a lot of time outdoors when I was a child. I like understanding how things work. I'm a very visual person, so biology really worked. For me, I just pursued it as long as I could. And I just love understanding the mechanisms behind the way things are, which always seems incredible for biology because they're such complex systems. So the fact that we can understand anything about them at all is just incredible. And there's a lot of beauty there. And it's just fascinating. But because they're such complex systems, they require such a lot of painstaking work to understand them. So I think I'm better on the armchair side of biology, finding out what other people have done now.
hmm You're actually also an author.
Mm-hmm.
Could you go into some detail about God in the Lab?
Yeah, so that work was something I did. It was part of a project funded by the Templeton World Charity Foundation, where the aim was to help church leaders to see the connections between science and faith. So I did quite a lot of speaking, quite a lot of events. I connected with some scientists, asking them, you know what, if we get to start the conversation, what would you talk about? So we're not talking about controversy, we're talking about what's cool, what inspires you, how your science and your faith connect. And I did a bunch of initial interviews and then discovered that they were interested in things like beauty or wonder. Some organic chemists I met in particular were interested in creativity. That led me to imagination. And then there was also a desire in general for me and from other scientists to help people to understand what it actually meant to work in a lab and do science. So, the aim behind the book was to communicate that work and just really be a sort of bridge building to to show ordinary people that there's stuff in science that can interest them, that we have the same kinds of experiences that they do, and then also to show that some of the experiences that people of faith are having are quite similar to the experiences that people in science are having, and in fact, those two groups obviously overlap. And that this is sort of trajectory through the book where we get closer and closer and closer to, spiritual experience and people's experience of God, which or as some scientists who aren't Christians would express, the sort of numinous sort of moments of that they might call spiritual, but that a Christian would connect with God.
Beautiful. What year was that published?
2015, I think.
2015. You actually have a more recent book
Mm-hmm.
this year, if I'm not mistaken, Wonders of the Living World.
Yep.
Could you again go into that and go into detail about that?
Yeah, so it hasn't been published yet. Yeah, it's a complicated project. It's an illustrated book, so you can look out for it whenever it does appear. So the aim was really to take that conversation further. This was another project funded by the Templeton World Charity Foundation. It was a new project to really open up conversations about the science in particular. So looking at biology and saying, is this compatible with the idea of purpose? Which is quite a hot topic for some biologists. And the short answer is yes, in a small sense, you can very directly connect biological systems with purpose in terms of, the cheetah is catching the antelope so it can feed its young. So it's a very goal-oriented process. So it's kind of a little p purpose. But then for the scientists, 6 scientists I interviewed for that book, who are also people of faith, for them, their biology is compatible with a large, big P purpose, a sort of sense of meaning and meaning in the world. Not that the science is evidence for God or evidence for meanings and things, but it's compatible with it. And through that book, we go again. It's another sort of trajectory from the very small to whole ecosystems, looking at the questions that scientists' work raises, going into some of the details of the science in a layperson's way. Lots of pictures, lots of beautiful photographs. People from all over the world contributed the most incredible photographs to it. And yeah, just helping people, hopefully people in the church and then also their friends and family, to revel in the science and think, oh wow, I had no idea. For
Mhm.
example, one of the chapters is about how fruitful the whole universe is. How incredibly likely it was that life would emerge on a planet. It wasn't a surprise. It looked set up to be fruitful.
Mm. Beautiful. So I'm gonna tell a story from when I was a child. I
Mm-hmm.
was about 5 years old, and I was laying in bed and imagining the vastness of the universe. And in an instant, I had, you could call it an epiphany, and I just knew that there was a creator,
Mm-hmm.
that everything didn't just come into existence, that there had to have been a creator of creation.
Mm-hmm.
And that stuck with me my whole life. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't find Christ until many years later,
Mm-hmm.
15 years or so later, but that experience stuck with me. So I know you do a lot of talks, and I've heard
Mm-hmm.
multiple where you talk about awe and wonder and beauty. What would you
Yeah.
say that that experience for me was? What would you classify that as?
So what were you thinking of, sorry, while you were having this epiphany? You were in bed and were you looking at the stars or
I was I was just imagining galaxies and how vast the universe is and how big it is and that it couldn't have
yeah.
just appeared out of nowhere.
Hmm. Yeah. So yeah, and I think that's the compatibility, I think, or what you could say that the things we discover with science is it points us to ask it prompts us to ask these big questions. Or you could say it's pointing towards, I believe, pointing towards an answer. I don't think it's you can interpret the data in a number of ways. So some people look at those things you were dwelling on as a child and will say, gosh, what a frightening universe. I'm so small. It's so cold and dark and, meaningless. And I don't think the data itself can help you to distinguish between those two views, the meaning and the lack of meaning, the frightening and the fruitful and the incredible. I suspect, yeah, well, I believe in God. So I believe in that moment you were connecting with God and the creator of the universe. He was giving you an insight in his grace, and you were open to it. Maybe through some of the things you've been exposed to, I don't know, but that you grasped some truth, I believe, about the universe at that point. But I think, yeah, you have to recognize when you're stepping outside of science. We can really enjoy exploring science. It can then prompt questions like, what's it all for? Or who am I? Or what does it mean? Or where did it come from? Who was there a person behind it? That then when you start answering those questions, you have to recognize that in order to answer them, you're going to go outside the domain of science. And that's okay, that's good. We have to do that. Otherwise, yeah, we would live in a very narrow existence. Science can only really answer questions to do with mechanisms and but yeah, no, so that's how I process it. And I think, yeah, it's fascinating to ask scientists what are their experiences of awe, and then what do they do with them? Where do they go after that?
Beautiful. Thanks so much. I'm interested just to hear your answer on curiosity.
Mm.
How important is curiosity, whether a young child or an aged person?
I think we are curious. I mean, it is part of the human condition. I mean, other animals are curious too. You just need to watch, particularly young animals who are exploring the world, and humans do that too. It's gosh, it's so valuable. I mean, if we're not curious, life would be very, very dull. We wouldn't make very much progress. Probably wouldn't survive. And it's that curiosity, I think, that does lead people not just to have the questions, but then to say, I'm not going to live with this uncertainty. I want to explore the answers to it. And I think that's what we have a schools team, and they go into high schools, primary schools in the UK, and do a lot of events. And they're bombarded with questions from young people who've looked at the science and then have questions. And I get that in churches as well. So I think we we need to be curious, and we need to not worry about the kinds of questions we're asking. If the question's cool or not, we don't really mind. Just need to say it.
Mm. What do you think it means to be, I don't know, curious as a child? What would you say that means?
Well, I think you're making your acquaintance with the world. Everything's new. I think. I mean, would you say as a 5-year-old that the universe was something you were especially curious about?
Absolutely, yes.
And what drove that curiosity?
Just the unknown and not knowing
Yeah.
how it got there.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and I think that's, yeah, I mean, the older you get, the more busy we get. So it can be easy to not allow ourselves the space to exercise our curiosity or to squash curious questions because we just don't have time to answer them, or maybe we think we know the answers, or maybe we've learned enough. We don't think there's much new out there. I don't know. It's a shame, but G.K. Chesterton wrote an essay called Tremendous Trifles, which I referenced in my book God in the Lab, and he was very much in favour of, even in what seemed like the dullest surroundings, actually looking in detail and being curious about your surroundings and observing, he said, was very, very important.
It's beautiful. Yes. So I know for me, sometimes I can just take things for granted. And I think when you lose your curiosity, you just get used to things and things kind of lose their beauty.
Mm.
And I find that when I just recenter and just kind of sometimes literally smell the flowers, smell the
Yep.
roses, and you just appreciate everything in a whole new way and in a
Mm.
deeper way.
Mm. And I think when we're recording this well, certainly for the UK, we're stuck in our homes during the COVID pandemic, and we're, one thing we're encouraged to do is to go out once a day and get some exercise. And a lot of people, I live on the outskirts of Cambridge where there are lots of fields, and people are going out for walks, on bike rides, or running, and just, I think a lot more people are appreciating nature. I'll be really, really interested to see how that impacts society for the next 20 years as people, and also partly lower pollution, lower road noise. We live near quite a big, busy road, but it's much quieter now. You can hear the birds sing. We're having a very warm spring. There's a lot of lovely flowers. I think, yeah, I think people will be appreciating creation, and especially because it's such a lovely counterbalance to the horrible events that are happening. I think people are, well, certainly I'm finding solace in the beauty of spring. Um,
Absolutely. Actually, for my trip that I'm on, I was traveling overseas, but our group had to come back early because
mhm,
of COVID-19. And we're finishing out in the southern USA in Georgia.
mhm,
And it's so beautiful to me that we came back in springtime because, like that, I've been going out for a walk every day or multiple times a day. And just to be able to go out in the spring and smell those smells, and there's so many different smells, and everything's just coming to life from winter. And I mean, there's no better time or place for me to be stuck inside and not be able to go outside as much as I'd like.
mhm. Yeah, and I think a lot of people are homeschooling their kids just now, and I think that being outside, yeah, I'll be really interested to see how we do from a point of view of protecting green space, attention to caring for the environment, for mitigating climate change, and such like. I wonder if there'll be a lot more support for those kinds of movements now. We'll see.
So, with God and creation, awe and beauty and curiosity
Hmm.
and poetry, I just I want to bring all those things in because I just want to show people just the wonderful things in nature and maybe even try to get them to realize again, that everything's so bright and raise their curiosity again. And I always say beauty because it's really important to me because I think in nature there's so much poetic beauty, and nature's so ripe with metaphors and metaphors of beauty, and just nature's so poetic. I'm curious if you have any quotes. What are some of your favorite quotes? They don't have to be on poetry. They don't have to be poetry or on beauty. But I'm curious if you have any on your mind. That would be
Um, Beauty. I wouldn't remember quotes off by heart, unfortunately, but I think, sorry, my mind's gone a blank. I really don't
oh,
know
no
what's going.
worries.
Somebody wrote a famous poem about beauty and truth, and it was about a Greek vase, and they said, beauty would point you to truth. And I think I don't. Yeah, I don't. I think that's a bit optimistic, and I think it's a nice idea. It's a very sort of romantic idea in terms of the romantic movement, but I, yeah, I don't. And certainly in science, beauty can be a pointer to truth, but I think beauty is largely in the eye of the beholder. So I think once you've got a system that you think is beautiful, or a way of looking at data or numbers or whatever that you think is beautiful that works, yeah, that's going to drive your research. But once you come up against the boundaries of what's known and you have new challenges in your research, that principle may let you down. And it has done in the past. It let Einstein down. So I think we need to be careful. But I think certainly for a lot of scientists, they will love the things they work on. I used to study zebrafish. I used to watch them grow. I thought they were beautiful. And I think that love of your experimental system or your equations or whatever it is that you think is beautiful is a very helpful driver for research to help keep you going when things are a bit boring or a bit frustrating. So I'm not quite sure if that's what you meant me to share, but it can
No,
put
that's
me on the
great.
right track if I'm not.
Thanks so much. So before we end, I would love to talk about what are some of your aspirations for the future, whether it's to do with your work or not, and also what your life mission is.
Mhm. Well, as a Christian, I'm a follower of Christ, and I would just love. I'm certainly thinking in response to COVID-19. I've been writing a series of articles on suffering and where God is during times like this, and I would just love people to realize that the some of the things people say about science and religion are based on a completely wrong understanding of who God is and his character. And I think believing in a God and experiencing a God who cares, a God who is on the side of the poor and the suffering, that is always there for people who cry out to him, who will always help people to keep going when life is difficult, when they ask him, then, I think that's a much, I'd rather have those discussions than, why did God let this happen? How could a God exist when, the other thing happens? I think it's often based on a misunderstanding of um, who God is and also what the way life works. I think we can often promise ourselves a very comfortable life, which I think is quite a recent phenomenon. And if life is not comfortable, we get very outraged. We have this sort of sense of right to a very comfortable life. I mean, it's nice when it is. And I have to say, I mean, living in England, I have a very comfortable life. So I although that has been tested from time to time. And I think I'd rather have conversations about who I believe God is and that science is a way of exploring his creation. I believe that creation happened slowly, that the science can reveal a lot about, can reveal a huge amount about how that happened, that it's worth exploring, that science is a way of glorifying God by studying his creation. So those kinds of conversations that, as you say, that beauty can turn our minds to God, wonder and awe can turn our minds to God, that, we in the church, I'd love to see the church affirming science, affirming young people studying science more, supporting the scientists in their midst. Yeah, having debates sometimes. I mean, that's important, but more, getting involved in practical things, caring for creation around in their local area, or, supporting science that serves the poor or that serves not just humankind, but also the rest of creation. And, getting involved in ethical discussions, there's so much we can do. So I'd love to see the church engaging with science in a healthy way and not, circling the wagons and having these conversations about sometimes, things like creation or evolution or arguments for or against God or how God acts, can God do miracles, things like this. They are important, but if that's all we do, if we just get stuck on debates and maybe very tiny points of theology, they can get quite obscure. I think if that's all we think about in terms of science faith, I think it's quite unhelpful. I would like to see people excited, enjoying themselves in those discussions and affirming. I love it. For example, we had a local cathedral in Ely had a science festival, and the whole place was full of groups doing hands-on science demonstrations, which I think is amazing in a place of worship. That's lovely to see people worshipping God by exploring his creation. So those are the kind of aspirations that I have. I would love to see science not being a barrier to faith for anyone anymore. I would love to see science not dividing churches, theological lines. And then I would love to see a lot more of the positive stuff. So that's why I do what I do. I have no idea how I ended up doing this. I sort of follow my nose into it. But, that's why I stay. That's why I do it, because I want to see people. And, ultimately recognizing the exciting questions that science can ask. For example, about the fruitfulness of the universe, or about the seemingly purposeful process of evolution, or the richness of ecosystems and the intrinsic value of ecosystems. There's so much we can talk about there. So, those kinds of things.
Thanks so much. That's beautiful. Well, Ruth, I'm so grateful for having you on. Thanks so much.
Great. It was good to talk to you, Tyler.